All right, so thanks everybody. We're going to give this another just moment. It looks like we've got a number of participants coming in. We will give it one moment to let them time to come in. I am Dan Anthony. I am the executive director of We Pay the Tariffs. We've got a number of great small businesses here to talk about our recent Supreme Court amicus brief, along with Jeffrey Schwab from Liberty Justice Center, who filed one of the original cases. We are going to do a quick run through here. I'll say a few words. I'll turn it over to Jeffrey to talk about the case, and then we'll turn it over to each of the small businesses. We will be doing a Q&A in the chat. I would say that for those interested in asking questions, don't hold off. Let's start putting them in as soon as you have them, so that when the businesses owners finish speaking, we've got those already teed up. And that'll allow us to really keep this conversation moving. I'll just start by saying thank you to all of the businesses here. And so last week, We Pay the Tariffs filed this amicus brief. We had more than 700 signers onto that brief. We profiled about 30 small businesses, of which 5 of them are here today to just give that firsthand experience of their life really over the last 6 months of trying to deal with these on again, off again tariffs and how that's impacting their business. We Pay the Tariffs launched earlier this year, really in response to a lot of the questions that we were getting from small businesses who just don't have those resources to navigate constant tariff change. I think in a normal year, if you go back historically, the tariff schedule would change twice. It changed once on July 1st, and then again at the beginning of the new year, and everyone knew what was coming and were able to adapt. There have been more than 40 changes to the tariff codes so far this year, which just really creates an undue burden on small businesses in particular, who are trying to not just sort of pay attention to trade. They have real jobs here, which is running businesses, growing businesses, keeping their employees active and working. And so we launched this because we wanted to be a hub, a resource for both the companies who are asking questions, but for others who are trying to figure out what the impacts of these tariffs are. And so we have more than 700 companies who have signed on from across the country. We have an open letter that continues to grow. We've had new signers since last week, and we are recirculating that letter to members of Congress to let them know when new companies are signing on. And we also hope for the press on the call here to be a resource. How do we take requests from people who say, I'm looking to speak to someone who meets qualifications A, B, and C, or I'm looking to speak to companies in this industry or in this region, or importing from this country. So how can we be that resource and just really connect folks with those companies who can speak firsthand to this? Again, this is a really, really critical case. There have been, it looks from our estimates a little bit tougher with the shutdown, but it seems that there's been over $100 billion collected of IEEPA tariffs. They are affecting companies in every single state. We have data on our website at wepaythetariffs.com. We have state-by-state breakdowns for the local press with the data through July. Again, the government shutdown means we're not releasing data, so it's very dated. Most of this is now probably 2 times higher in terms of what we might report for a given state when you take it through the end of October. But I will stop here and then turn it over first to Jeffrey Schwab from Liberty Justice Center, who can give a little bit more background on the case itself.
Thanks, Dan. First, I just want to say thank you to the small businesses that signed on to this brief. It's a really important and powerful brief. If you get to the end of it and you look at all the names on the brief, and you have to scroll down 29 pages, it's very powerful. And also the stories in it are really important. It's important to tell the stories of how these tariffs impact businesses, because they do so in different ways. And we represent 5 small businesses. VOS Selections and is the case that we filed. And each of those businesses have been affected by the tariffs differently as well, and also in ways that are contrary to what the administration says it wants. Just as an example, VOS Selections is a wine and other spirits importer. Well, with wine, there's no way that you're going to replicate wines from, say, Bordeaux in the United States. So they're just different products. They're not going to improve manufacturing or anything in the United States by tariffing wines from other countries. So just that example alone shows that the broad sort of tariffs on every country on every product is not going to serve the administration's supposed interests. So the stories that were in the brief that We Pay Tariffs filed are excellent and do the similar thing. From a legal perspective, these tariffs are authorized under a statute called the International Emergency Economic Powers Act. It's often called IEEPA. And no president has ever used IEEPA to impose tariffs. It's been on the books for about 50 years, since the 1970s. And it was actually a statute that was intended to curb the president's emergency powers after the Nixon administration. And other presidents in the past had used emergency powers in what Congress felt was abusive ways. And so now we have a president that wants to impose tariffs using IEEPA. But the other problem with that is that he doesn't think that IEEPA really limits him in any way. So he thinks that he can impose tariffs on any country at any time, for any reason, for any length of time, and then change course whenever he wants. And of course, that creates a huge amount of uncertainty in addition to the burden of having to pay tariffs that are, in some cases, over 15%. In other cases, much higher, and in many ways, just a complete barrier to importing products or raw materials from those countries. And the reason, obviously, I already mentioned that IEEPA does not say, or that has never been used to authorize tariffs, and that's for good reason. It doesn't say anything about tariffs or taxes or duties or imports or any. It does say imports, but it just says regulate imports. And IEEPA has been used as basically a sanctions statute against foreign countries that have done things that the United States feels are a threat to its national security. Not tariffs. And so the first argument that we've made in the case is that IEEPA just doesn't authorize tariffs at all. But even if it does, the next argument is that it's not an emergency. At least with the Liberation Day tariffs, the justification was the trade deficit, and a trade deficit we've had for 50 years. The IEEPA also has a limit. It has to be an unusual or extraordinary threat. Trade deficit is not unusual. And in fact, admittedly, by the president himself in his executive order, it's not extraordinary because he labels the trade deficit as persistent. So not unusual or extraordinary if it's persistent, especially for 50 years. And then the tariffs on China, Canada, and Mexico, which our case actually doesn't address, but the other 2 cases were consolidated with Learning Resources, and the one filed by 12 states does address that. The reason ours doesn't address it is not because any of our clients don't pay tariffs from China, Mexico, or Canada. It's because it was a strategic decision when we filed the case, because we thought that the justification for the Liberation Day tariffs was much worse, because the justification for the other tariffs, for what they call, what I'm calling the fentanyl tariffs, is basically that Canada, Mexico, and China were not doing a good enough job preventing fentanyl from coming into the United States. That's also not a great justification, but a little closer to a national security or issue than a trade deficit. And so we also have several other arguments. There's a doctrine that the Supreme Court has used more recently, called the major questions doctrine, that says when you're interpreting a statute that authorizes the president some power from Congress, that if it has to do with an important or economic or political issue, that Congress needs to speak clearly about it. Obviously, Congress has not spoken clearly in IEEPA because it doesn't say anything about tariffs. And obviously, this is a case of huge economic consequence because of the amount of money and the consequences to businesses of the tariffs. And then finally, even if we're wrong about all of that, even if IEEPA does authorize tariffs, the president's interpretation of IEEPA is so broad that effectively it would mean that IEEPA just authorizes the president to do whatever he wants on tariffs. And that's where the Constitution comes in, because Congress is given the power under the Constitution. In fact, the very first clause of Congress's power gives it the power to tax and tariff. And Congress can delegate some of that power if it wants to the executive, but it can't just delegate all of it without any kind of checks. And so the Constitution doesn't allow that. There's a doctrine that the court has used sometimes called the non-delegation doctrine, that basically says Congress just can't give up any of its constitutional authority to the executive branch without any kind of limit. And the president's interpretation of IEEPA effectively would be that Congress gave the president the power to tax and tariff, or at least tariff, without any kind of check, because he thinks he can authorize tariffs for whatever he wants, whenever he wants. And of course, we've seen that over the last 6 months. In particular, even last week with the tariffs, additional tariffs on Canada, for a reason that has nothing to do with fentanyl, national security, or the trade deficit. So those are our arguments, and we feel very confident about them, because we only have to win one of those arguments to win the case. And so the administration has to win every single one. And so far, we've been successful in the Court of International Trade and in the Federal Circuit Court of Appeals. We've had 3 judges rule in our favor in the Court of International Trade, and of the 11 judges in the Federal Circuit, 7 ruled in our favor in that case. So we're hopeful that we can win this case, and that these tariffs, at least under IEEPA, will be repealed.
Thanks, Jeffrey. I have a very quick question from one of the people, the attendees, and that is whether the government shutdown will impact the streaming or any of the other sort of functions of the court.
That's a good question. One that we were discussing yesterday. I don't think it will. I know that the court has limited public access during the shutdown, but that's for non-argument days. As far as I'm aware, on the court's website, where it talks about our oral argument, it says it's open to the public. It should have a streaming audio feed, as it usually does for every oral argument case, and that'll be live. And then it should also be available after the argument as a recorded download. I don't know when that actual download would be available, but usually it's within 24 hours. So if you can't listen to the argument at 10 a.m. on next week, a week from today, that audio should be available to you within within a day or so. I know there's several like podcasts and stuff that use that audio download and just put up the audio on their podcast. So that should be available in many locations for everybody's listening pleasure.
Thank you. So with that, we're going to turn it over to some of the small businesses here. So Cassie, if you want to start, let the folks know a little bit about yourself and how these are impacting you.
Absolutely. First of all, thank you to everyone here who's fighting on our behalf. It's a community effort right now to just get through this. So bear with me. I'm going to read some notes so I don't miss anything, but I'm the founder of a brand called Wild Rye. We produce highly technical outdoor apparel for women. We're based here in Idaho. We're B Corp certified. So we actually launched as a USA made brand, and that effort almost tanked us before we came to market. The product was so flawed, the price was so high. We actually had to hire third-party seamstresses to unsew and resew our garments before we could launch. So pretty obviously, we decided that the US manufacturing wasn't an option for our product. So we looked to Asia. And when we started looking to Asia, we found that China was the only country that could produce our highly technical product at low enough minimum order quantities to accommodate a small business like ours. For reference, we produce ski gear, cycling gear, outdoor apparel. It's all technical fabrics. All the fabrics come from overseas. So needless to say, the supply chain for what we produce just doesn't exist here in the US. The skilled labor doesn't exist here in the US, and it would take generations to rebuild that supply chain. Textiles have not been a priority of this administration, and it would take significant investment from our country in order to bring textiles in any form of scale back to the US. So based on real costs, what we've been up against, so far this year, we've paid about $300,000 hard cash and unplanned tariffs. Just to give you an idea of scale, that's about 10% of our revenue this year. So it's pretty substantial. That was a lot of cash for us to come up with. That's in addition to on average 20% baseline duties. We've also spent hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of hours countersourcing product, pausing production, restarting production, rushing production, running price analyses, cost analyses, shipping analyses. We rushed product in to beat the August 12th deadline on China that then got extended. So we paid an arm and a leg to airship our product to beat that deadline. And we are grateful that it was extended for a period longer, but it was just the uncertainty of that was really challenging on a business of our size. In addition, we launched a crowdfunding campaign to raise capital, which meant that I sold more of my business than I intended to at this stage. So we launched a equity crowd raise on a platform called WeFunder, where our community actually invested in the Wild Rye brand to enable us to keep growing. I should mention we're one of the fastest growing brands in the outdoor industry and the state of Idaho. So this has really taken some momentum away from us and we are no longer investing into product innovation. We're not investing into new hires. We're not investing into growth. We're just spending our money trying to stay afloat through this. Our working capital, basically all of our debt is personally guaranteed, and my house is leveraged in order to get access to that capital. So every tariff increase means the risk of losing my home. It means the longer that it's taking to pay off debt with high interest rates. So yeah, I mean, my family's housing is at stake in addition to everything else. And on top of that, we're paying interest rates that are quite high, and that's leaving less capital to invest into growth, into new hires and innovation. We've had to pause, like I said, pause and rush production. We've frozen hiring. We've canceled all plans for new headcount next year. And then after a lot of debate and analysis, we did end up having to raise our prices 10 to 15% across the board. We only sell in the US, and so we can't squirrel away our inventory in other markets like larger brands can. So we can't absorb 50% tariffs on our own. And so that's only hurting our customers and our retailers. We have been spending a lot of time and energy looking to countersource to other countries across Asia. We were getting close to moving some of our production to India, only to find that India was then slapped with another 25%, bringing their tariff rate to 50%. So, for reference, we plan our product. We start developing our product 2 to 3 years in advance of it coming to market. It takes a lot of rounds of sampling and getting the fit right, getting the materials right. So if we were to move to a new factory, we would essentially be starting from scratch. That's a huge cost investment. It's a huge time investment. It's a big risk. And so we've had to stay put where we are in China until things settle to try to see where we can economically produce our product elsewhere across the globe, if anywhere. And so while certainty is certainly something that we're looking for, we're also very much so hoping and praying and just willing the administration to bring tariffs back down to zero or as close to as possible, because the amount that we're having to fork out is substantial. For example, the most recent thing I read was that we're expecting tariff rates to land around 45% for China. We're bringing in a purchase order of about 1.5 million. That means $750,000 of additional tariffs. That's on top of our baseline duties. So that's our quick story. We're not reinvesting into other partners, into events, into agencies that typically support us, because our cash is completely tied up into tariffs. So it's affecting far more than just our employees. It's affecting our whole ecosystem of partners. So thank you so much for the time, and happy to answer any questions, but I'll hand it off to whoever's next.
Great. So next up, Abesh.
Hey everyone, good to meet you. My name is Abesh and I am the founder of Flora. Flora is all about saving your plants. I invented a little plant sensor that acts as a life alert for your plants. A couple years ago, the idea came from killing my mom's prized rosebush plant that she had for years, and I killed it in 8 short days. We were able to get it onto Shark Tank, and we really ended up blowing up just in the last year, year and a half alone. What I didn't expect in that journey was essentially getting crippled along the way in our supply chain with these external tariffs. To put it in perspective, one of the first things that I did or tried to do was chase, the Made in America route, right? I was very proud to look at local suppliers. I'm based here in Nashville, Tennessee, and one of the first suppliers that we looked at to manufacture these fluoropods that we patented are creating from scratch. That means we're literally coming up with the printed circuit boards and all the components and all the assembly in-house. We were looking for an OEM and manufacturer in the States. We found one based in Huntington, Alabama, and they essentially were one of the cheapest ones we could find. The minimum order quantity was 10,000 units for that supplier. It's the lowest they could go. And the lowest price per unit at 10,000 units was approximately $55. And to put it in perspective, we sell one of these for $50 or less. It just became completely, mismanaged in the sense that we couldn't afford that. We couldn't really make the unit economics work. And so, of course, we looked outside. China has one of the best kind of unit economics that we could afford at the time, especially for small scale ramp up. And so we were able to get our supply chain started in China. When we produced our first batch, our shipping for a minimum order quantity of 2,000 units was approximately about $8,000. This year, when the first round of reciprocal tariffs came out back in April, May, the shipping bill that we were potentially looking at was about $34,000. It was completely untenable. We couldn't have imagined that this was, a trade war effect that we would have to deal with. And even now, when we're looking at the baseline 10%, the additional fentanyl tariffs, we're still paying 40-50% total tax on incoming purchase orders. What does that mean for the business? It means, exactly to Cassie's point, we have to literally put off inventory purchases. We have to recycle and do whatever we can with current, pricing analysis and Sorry, I'm dealing with a baby in the background here as well. That's the life of a small business owner and a dad. It's also the matter of pushing off R&D and development of our products by several months. So we were supposed to launch our newest version of the sensor, the FluoroPod V2. You can already kind of tell it's 50% smaller, better tech. We were super excited for this, especially going off the excitement of our Shark Tank launch. And it was supposed to launch by Christmas of this year, and we're now looking closer to April or May because of the uncertainty that we're facing around tariffs. So not only have we had to push off R&D and development, we've had to push off the purchase orders and inventory purchases that we planned all the way ahead in advance for Christmas by another 6 months. Not only that, but because of the cash flow tightness and because of the uncertainty of planning for all the spikes in those duties and fees, we essentially had to reduce our headcount by about 25% leading up to this quarter to ensure that we could absorb the shocks of those inventory purchases and of those unit economics increases. So it's hit us across the board. It's not just a supply chain issue. It's a headcount issue. It's an existential crisis. Truly, it's a man-made existential crisis, the likes of we haven't seen since COVID. And it's frustrating because this is, all man-made. It can be literally taken back and it starts at the top. And so we're very, very fortunate and very grateful to have We Pay the Tariffs and the National Retail Federation and the community kind of gathering to get our voices heard. And so we're very looking forward to certainty in the situation so that we can plan ahead as a small business to make sure that customers aren't just absorbing, all those cost increases at the end of the day, for which, unfortunately, they have been. We absorb as much as we can, but customers are still going to be seeing about a 10 to 15% price increase, which is supposed to be a 10 to 15% price decrease by the end of the year. But the uncertainty of the situation led it to the opposite result.
Thanks, Abesh. Turn it over here to Jess.
Good morning, everybody. My name's Jess Nepstead with Planetary Design. We have a company here in Bonner, Montana, just along the Blackfoot River, quite a place. We're about a 25-year-old company. I bought it 10 years ago. We've seen some substantial growth in the last 10 years. Been really excited about, adding 15 more employees to our team and patenting a lot of products, launching a lot of brands. We do that with the best-in-class partners in China. They're unmatched anywhere else. We've looked everywhere. Some of the speakers before me, we've looked in India, we've looked in Japan, we've looked at the United States. Not even close to what's offered. I'm a capitalist for sure. I think best in price, best in quality should win every time, and they do that in China. So we're still looking at other countries, but of course they're seeing tariffs as well. So the cost to move is not rewarded. I wanted a couple points I would say is that tariffs have required more management than COVID. And when COVID hit, 65% of our business was with coffee shops. So, I mean, COVID was a left-hand turn for us and really difficult. We were able to expand into camping with our coffee goods and our drinkware and our travel presses. So camping kind of, grew during COVID, and people also had to start making coffee at home. So they purchased a lot of our brewing equipment. So that allowed us to survive. With the tariffs, I wanted to just share what we've done as a company and how we've pivoted, if you will, to survive. In that we opened up 3PL warehouses in other countries, Netherlands, Canada. We're looking to open up one in India. And so we're shifting our whole focus of our business on growing outside the United States because there's so much drag and uncertainty. It's impossible to manage. I think at the end of it, we'll be a better and stronger company. But, we've reduced our headcount by 10% here in the United States. And then we've raised our prices 20% in the United States. But conversely, up in Canada, we've dropped our prices in Canada before tariffs and post tariffs because the folks in Canada are buying our products cheaper than we are. And we're seeing tremendous growth there, nice growth in Germany. And so we've just shifted our whole business focus, our marketing dollars. Cassie mentioned, that ecosystem you have that surrounds your business that impacts everybody around you, even the nonprofits you support, et cetera. We're shifting all those dollars to Europe and trying to find growth partners there, distributor partners, spending marketing dollars there instead of here in the United States. And that's really been how we've shifted our business, because there's no certainty here, and it's really hard to compete, and you spend countless mindless hours trying to navigate it. At the same time, our retail partners are struggling, trying to figure out how to navigate it as well, where it's easier just to do business outside the United States. I didn't think I'd ever say that in my 40 years in business. But the other thing I want to say is, those tariffs, I think there's a place for tariffs, but they have to be done strategically and precisely, and to protect our country. And for me, they've been capricious. And, I always give the analogy when folks if every paycheck, you get a paycheck and the tax rate changes and it's due right then, not at the end of the year when you file, but due right then. Imagine your paycheck's $100, but the tax is $145. So you got to come up with $145 to get your paycheck. And that's what's happened with us with tariffs. It's due at the port. There's no way to plan. It's changed while it's on the water. If you make a contract with Target, Container Store, Sur La Table, some of our partners, I'm out of contract. I mean, I either got to eat it or I got to go to them and say, sorry, I can't, honor the contract price that I gave you. And that's really brutal on a business. And for, it's just not, it's capricious and it's unlawful. I think it falls under the Amendment 4 if you go through there and read that. But one of my last comment was on cash flow. We were overcharged by $200,000 on one container. And of course it's payable and due when you do it. We had to get the products so we could meet our obligations. We went back and proved to them that we were overcharged by 200 grand, and they said it'd take us 300 days to get our money back. And it's not the end of the world for us, but it's just like, well, if all this gets repealed and IEEPA, how long is it going to take for all of us businesses to get our money back? It's going to be mind blowing. And this is just one instance of 200 grand is going to take 300 days. Yet I got to pay them when the stuff comes through the port. So very difficult, very tough to manage. And it's sad that we can't keep putting more jobs in Montana that we were adding before, and we've just paused it all. So thanks for the time, and appreciate everybody's efforts to make some noise around this.
Thanks, Jess. Alicia.
Hi, I'm Alicia Navarro from Two Hounds Design. We are a 22-year-old company, and we were founded in my spare bedroom. I sewed every collar in the beginning. And over the years, we've grown to a team of over 50 people. We haven't hired in the people that we plan to hire this year. We plan to be somewhere between 65 and 70 people. And I will say that our market is very international. The United States is number 1, Canada's number 2, Australia's number 3, Europe's number 4. So the product that we make is the Freedom No Pull harness, and it's recommended by veterinarians and trainers all over the world. And we're the only company that makes it as a patented product. So I've chosen to keep manufacturing here in the United States. And part of that reason is I'm in North Carolina, which is actually a textile mecca, even though a lot of it has moved overseas. But having the product made here allows me to be a lot more flexible and go into more fashion type designs, because the pet industry, they want their dogs to look cute. Even though my product is made here, it's made with raw material that's sourced from overseas. We use a Swiss velvet lining that protects the dog's skin so that it doesn't get sores when you walk. That comes from Switzerland. And nobody's really talking about a lot of the tariffs besides the ones that are making the headlines, but even Switzerland is sitting at a 39% tariff. And one of the other items that I wanted to address is the devaluing of the US dollar has cost us an additional 20%, meaning a year ago, the valuation was about $1.09 per Swiss franc, and now it's $1.29 or $1.32 the last time I looked per Swiss franc. And so in addition to the tariffs, because we pay them in their currency, we are actually losing an additional 20% due to the conversion rate. We have an additional loss because some of our larger contracts that we work with pay us in their currency as well. And so we're losing the value of the dollar. So that's one of the points that I think is getting overlooked somewhat, that there's a financial part of this. Everybody's talked about the uncertainty, and I just want to say that you can't fix an emergency with a chainsaw. And you know, doctors, when they deal with emergencies day to day, and their first rule is do no harm. And I believe that what this has done with 40 changes in this year alone, all that's being done is harm. And as a small business, I don't have the tools and the resources and the team to navigate these changes like the larger companies do. And small businesses already at a disadvantage because we get on the bad end of everything. We get the bad end of providing insurance for our employees because we're too small. And we get the bad end of I can't even get a material made here in the United States if I wanted to because I'm too small. So this is doing major harm. I think we're going to see not only price increases from this, I think we're going to see a lack of innovation in the next year because all the small business owners are busy figuring out what to do next. And I will say that as a company that does make my product here, it's all small businesses that make their product here. Large corporations have the budget and all of the money that they need to have the product made overseas at a lower price point. The small businesses like me who employ about 50 people, I wear every hat and I don't have those resources available to me.
Thanks, Alicia. And last but certainly not least here, Scott, you want to?
Oh yeah, I was having sound problems earlier. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
We're good. And I will apologize because Dan did not save the best for last, I promise you. I'm Scott Mueller. I am the co-founder of Grill Sergeant. We have premium grilling tools and accessories. I can't help you grill better, but I can make sure you have the best equipment when you do it. This has been a great, 7-month roller coaster. In short, I'll be pretty quick here. We've got everything on pause right now. From when things started, 100% of our stuff's produced in China. So when things started, and then the volatility that's been fun ever since. We started the process like Cassie. We were going to switch. We were getting ready to switch over to India, and then all of a sudden, boom, that happens. And all of my products are gloriously made with 304 stainless steel. So when the stainless steel came through, we just, after all that, we've put everything on pause. So you'll all be very upset to know you're going to have to wait for our next round of products, which one of them is a magnetic cocktail holder when you grill. So that's all on pause. And in all seriousness, we had product from the beginning of the year that will get us through almost through this holiday. But we've limited any promotions. We're trying to maximize the profitability that we have on our current inventory that we have. I'm fortunate that Father's Day for us, so come the summertime, is just as good as Christmas. But if things don't change and the volatility still goes up and down, we can't responsibly make that decision for our company because it will absolutely raise the prices to the consumer. In our case, the way everything's look right now, we would have to raise our price by about 59% to be able to have the same margins. So it's not even a conversation that we want to have right now to punish that consumer. So we've got everything on pause, and that's sort of the hidden thing that goes on here. There's a lot of businesses that aren't raising their prices. They're choosing not to produce products, right? They're not selling their products, so they're pausing on that, and that's the hidden thing that a lot of people don't see here. I'm not getting the trademarks with my attorneys for the next round of products. I'm not shipping more products, more things out to the consumer, things like that. So there's a lot of ripple effect, a lot of little things that go on from everything that's happening with these tariffs, and it's strictly the volatility. And until that stabilizes, Grill Sergeant, we're just on pause from that standpoint. So I'll stop there.
Thanks, Scott. And I think, I think what's most interesting to me, and I'll sort of turn over to some questions that we've gotten here in a moment, is this sort of theme of lack of innovation and freezing in place. It's everyone's sort of putting things on hold, everyone's sort of pausing orders. And what does that mean, not necessarily for the economy today, but the economy next year, when these products aren't going to market? I have to imagine, and maybe I'd love to hear just quick thoughts from folks, how important those new versions of things are to your ongoing sales. Because that's, if everyone's pulled back, then what does that mean for sort of future prospects on things that can't be changed at this point? If anyone wants to jump in.
Yeah, I'm happy to. One thing I do want to add that I didn't mention is even with the tariff increase, if I tried to produce it in the States, it would still be more expensive. So that bringing that manufacturing to the U.S. is not an option. But if you can't innovate, someone else is just going to pass you. So when we're in a position where we can't continue to bring new products to market, improve the products that we have, and things like that, every business, you look at how you evolve in your career. My 25 plus career in e-commerce and CPG and all that. When I look at how I was 25 years ago, if I was still there, I wouldn't be sitting on this call. So you need to be able to continually come with fresh ideas. And like I said, we had an entire line of products, next round of products that bring you into this next fun time around the grill and being able to do those things. So there's no question you have to be able to innovate with your business.
Yeah, we're in the same boat, but we're a little further out. We had a whole product line that we were planning to bring to market in fall 27 that we've completely pushed off because it's just too expensive. We have too many unforeseen expenses to bring this, to invest into building this new category for ourselves. And, I've spoken with a lot of larger brands in our industry, and the large brands rely on small brands to push innovation across the whole industry because we're the ones that are more nimble and more creative and, pushing the industry forward. And so the whole, in my case, the whole outdoor industry is going to be years behind where we could be. And I know it's somewhat of a luxury industry, but it's also how people, take care of themselves mentally and physically and stay healthy. So it isn't important for our country's mental health. But yeah, I mean it's gonna delay innovation across the industry, not just on an individual brand basis. And it's going to continue to show up, that lack of innovation, for years to come, not just in the next year.
Thanks. We've got a question here. Are the businesses raising these detailed stories of tariff challenges with members of Congress? And if so, what has the response been? I know a number of you have, and so I'll see who wants to jump in.
I will say yes. I've contacted everyone who represents my region. I've contacted them by phone and by letter and by email. Typically, what I've been getting is kind of a canned response. It's I think they have one thing that that they've decided they're going to believe, and then it doesn't feel like they're listening.
I
I'll
would
jump
share
in
that.
Go ahead, Jess.
I would share that in June, I had the privilege to go to DC and meet with the constituent, the folks from Montana as well as Utah. I thought both sides of the aisle were very receptive in what we were sharing, but all seemed to be kind of frozen. The one thing I would say is they were all looking in the rearview mirror at data points behind us where unemployment inflation was, where all the business people I was traveling with, like this group here, we were all telling them about what we see in front of us, the ripple effects in front of us, and everything in front of us. And we said, what you're looking at is irrelevant. In 60 days, how much it's going to change with layoffs and prices. And then I would also say I've traveled to our state capital here, met people face to face, and I've never in my 40-year career business done it on any other issue. That's how major this is. And I've never written a letter and I've never signed anything until this. So it's a major deal.
And if I can jump in real quick on that, Steve, I think you asked that question. I would highly recommend, I want to give a shout out to the National Retail Federation, who's doing incredible work on the awareness of what's going on with these tariffs and how small businesses are being affected. And they're greatly involved in a lot of these meetings with Congress. And I've been fortunate and was actually with Abesh in one of my sessions in DC. So I would reach out to the National Retail Federation and talk to them because they'll have an incredible amount of information. But what I can say is what you're sold and privately what's going on are two totally different things. There's genuine action that's trying to take place, but when you have to deal with stuff politically, it's obviously a very fine line that they have to walk. So I would say probably 2/3 of my meetings that I had one-on-one with Congress, they were fruitful in the sense of conversation. there's post conversation with some of their staffers to generally try to make a difference. What we're talking about is trying to have an off ramp, the ability to have some kind of an answer. Because if, let's just say I had to pay a tariff right now that was 50%, but in 2 weeks the tariff drops to 10%, and I just paid 50%. What's my help going to be when for that order on the back end? So those are the kinds of conversations we've been trying to have, is that off ramp and just a solution, just like there was with COVID, a solution here for all these small businesses or businesses in general that have to pay the tariffs. And there has been healthy conversation from that standpoint.
Yeah, I'll just be really quick, but the conversations I had both with senators and Congress people when I was in DC in the spring, they just felt like their hands were tied and the communication barely existed between branches of government. And so they were like, we hear your story, we get it, but we're sort of paralyzed right now. I think there's a lot of career politicians out there that are nervous about standing up for their constituents because of the retaliatory nature of this administration. So yeah, I mean, we had a few people say that straight up. I'm not going to name names.
We've got a question here. The president is talking about reducing regulation to make conditions better for the future. And so just a question here on, the potential benefits of deregulation or the other things that the administration is doing versus the cost of the tariffs and how that nets out for any of you individually.
I don't think it changes the fact that the raw material that I need or the finished product that other small businesses need just isn't made here. And you can't change that in 6 months' time. It would take a ton of infrastructure that we don't have. It would take machines that we don't have. It would take skilled employees that we don't have. And so I don't think that deregulation is really going to be as much of a peace offering as he thinks it's going to be, because it just can't come here.
I would like to share one thing I don't think people look at, and hopefully it's unique and it's worth sharing, is if I sell an item for $10, my cost out of China is $2, right? And then I got to get it here and shipping and everything. So I'm in at $2.50. I sell it to Sam's outlet for $5, and he sells it to the consumer for $10. In that $10 price point, $7.50 of that value is in the United States. To pay my employees, to pay Sam's employees, to pay for marketing firms. The $2, 20% of that product cost is in China, and they have the employees that want to work for those wages. They have the factories and the skill sets that we don't have. And I don't know why we're so focused on that $2 of the value chain of $10. We got $10, and 1 out of every 4 jobs is a retail job in the United States. I don't know why we're so caught up in arms about chasing that last $2 of a $10 value chain when $8 is here and it's really clean. It's not requiring us to dirty our waters or get people to do jobs they might not want to do. It just baffles me.
So question, I think a lot of this, there's a question here on prior to the shutdown, was the Department of Commerce, Bureau of Industry and Security staff willing to meet with small business owners? I think Bureau of Industry and Security covers more of the Section 232 tariff, so I'm not sure if that's as relevant to folks, but I'll toss it out if anyone had met with commerce officials about this. No? Okay. We've got a couple of questions on, there's a question here on the fentanyl tariffs as it relates to Canada. I think, I don't think anyone here is necessarily importing directly from Canada, but you do have the fentanyl tariffs that are also affecting product from China. And so I guess there's maybe a question here on sort of how or whether you view these tariffs differently or whether this is just one big lump cost.
It feels like one big lump cost for me. I mean, it all comes out of the same pocket.
Question for Jeffrey here. The president has said that he may show up to the court hearings next week. Any thoughts on how that would impact, again, sort of the proceedings themselves, the ability of folks to attend, any of the other logistics around the hearing itself?
I don't know the answer to that. I do know that even if the president doesn't show up, there's limited space, and it's going to be difficult because of the importance of this case to attend, like it is many important Supreme Court cases. But fortunately, the Supreme Court does do the streaming, live streaming, and so anybody can listen to the oral argument live if they want to. So, I think that's good. And again, we don't know if the president will be there or not. But of course, from our perspective, it doesn't make a difference. We're focused on the merits of the case and presenting the arguments that we've made to the court.
Thank you. A quick question here on whether or the extent to which suppliers are willing to absorb some of the costs and how much of it is just falling on you.
I can take this, or at least kick it off. We have the fortune of having worked with our suppliers and manufacturers for nearly a decade now, and this is another reason why we haven't rushed to move out of China, is because our long-standing relationships, it's a true partnership, and they are taking a small bit of the hit. I mean, their margins are razor thin. Like, these manufacturers make their money on volume, not on the actual margin on any one product. So there's not a ton they can do to help, but they are willing to partner with us however they can. So it doesn't make a huge difference from the ultimate cost to us, but it does help a tiny bit.
We're in a similar boat as Cassie, where we've had supplier relationships with our OEM for years now in developing the FloraPod, in figuring out, different payment terms. And so in this situation, they have empathy, they have sympathy for us, but at the end of the day, there's only so much they're willing to do in terms of cost absorption, because China's not actually paying the tariffs, right? There's an outstanding, I think, misconception around this, especially with the public, and that, the countries pay the tariffs. And I can't believe that there's still a ton of folks out there that don't understand that it's the American company that's paying the tariffs and the taxes at the end of the day. So for these Chinese suppliers and OEMs, it's kind of like, well, it's not on us. It's not our problem to deal with. Obviously, they want to keep the relationship going. And the most they've done is some discounts. I'm talking like in the single digit percentages, some flexibility around payment terms. So, allowing us to kind of push off some of the payment later. But at the end of the day, it's us paying the US government those duties and those tariffs. And there's very little flexibility in negotiation power that we have with China and with the OEMs at the end of the day, right? So that is a misconception that I think is still ongoing at large, not only with the public, but I think still with a lot of politicians and folks that don't understand how this is directly impacting U.S. businesses and inevitably the U.S. consumers that are paying these tariffs.
And I'll add one more thing in addition to that, that our manufacturers in China have done, is they've made it extremely easy for me to basically, I have an order that's been produced that's sitting there waiting to come over. And I was able to produce that at 10% of my cost for the total order. Because if all of a sudden the end of this week, there's good news, or next week and there's stability that comes out of nowhere, and all of a sudden everyone's trying to put their orders in to get production, then you could be way behind in even that because of the overrun of people wanting to get their materials or their products produced. So that was an area that we took advantage of, and just a matter of us pulling the trigger to have that order come over to us.
And I'll say this is not from anyone on the call here, but talking to other companies about this, they sort of laughed and they said, if it's a 5% tariff, then you can negotiate with your supplier and maybe you split the cost. If it's 50 or 100 or 150%, that 2 or 3 percentage points doesn't make a difference. And so now it just becomes a joke. And the higher the tariffs go, the less the incentive for the supplier to really negotiate and figure out how you divvy up these costs, because they're just so large that what can be offered by the supplier in terms of discounts doesn't move the needle at all in terms of end pricing. So it's a counterintuitive thing where the higher the tariffs go, the less the suppliers are willing or able to make a meaningful concession like that. Just on the here's a fun one. How much of your time do you spend now on tariff-related issues compared to before President Trump took office?
Mental energy or actual accomplishing something? Because I think the answer is very different. My mental energy has been focused on this for quite a while and worrying about how am I going to get the next delivery of materials that I need, or can I delay it? Can we squish the inventory that we have right now? I would say that we do a physical inventory at least once a week, where typically we would not do a physical count of inventory nearly that often. So it's the ripple effect of the time that it's taking to deal with this it goes well beyond anything you can imagine.
I haven't, I'll add just real quickly because I can't go too much into it because of time, but my other company, I work with 40 brands across the country. And so what I've seen them go through, what we go through, I spend 50% of my day as a counselor for those brands with what they're going through and what the tariffs have presented to them. So I could talk for hours about it, but there's no question the mental toll that the tariffs have taken on the average business owner, and what's already, and it's not woe is us, when you're a small business owner, you make that choice, but these were this was not a plan. This was a surprise. And, none of us like surprises, especially if you're a parent. None of us like surprises. So, yeah, that mental toll's, it's pretty staggering to see.
Cassie, were you going to jump in there?
Yeah, I was going to say I spent 0 minutes on tariffs prior to this administration. And yeah, I would say, in the first 2 months after this, probably 100% of my time was focused on tariff-related issues, whether it was price analysis, communicating with retailers, reconsidering our product line, our supply chain. I had fainting spells leading up to the August 12th deadline because I was so stressed out and so nervous about what was going to come to. So it's taken a serious toll on health as well for a lot of founders.
We are running up to.
I actually cried when the ruling came down from the International Trade Court, and I had no idea I had that much mental energy or emotion tied into it. And I remember sitting on my porch 8 o'clock at night and hearing that ruling and actually wept. And I had no idea I was carrying that much stress.
A good lead in here. There's a question on for Jeff on sort of expected timing here in terms of a decision. Is there a ballpark? Is there a hopeful time frame, and then a sort of maybe a different window of what's expected?
Well, courts don't usually give themselves deadlines to make rulings, but the Supreme Court actually does generally have some sort of timeline because it has a season where it makes its decisions within a year. But in this case, because it's taken it sort of on an expedited basis, I know it's been more than 6 months since we filed the case, and I think for most people that feels like a lifetime, especially when you're dealing with the tariffs. But this is actually lightning fast speed for the court system. So I think the justices know that this is an important issue that needs to be decided sooner rather than later. I think it's very reasonable to expect that this will be decided before the end of the year, if not much more before that. But it's not going to be the day after the oral argument. It will be probably weeks after that.
Again, we are running up on time here. There was a question on it was Canada specific about the shift to 232s and other tariffs, and I think that is a reality that a lot of people are dealing with. Is that even if these IEEPA tariffs are struck down, you won't see tariffs end as an issue. You'll see it evolve into a different set of issues. And, on the Section 232 national security for steel and aluminum, you see things like peanut butter ending up on this list because it has some metal in it. And so what are the various ways that products could get wrapped up into these derivative product reviews, I think is going to be a big outstanding question regardless of what happens with these. And that'll affect sort of everyone who's bringing in product from around the world, but also some of the countries that are not sort of involved here, like Canada, where you have certain exemptions. But it doesn't seem that the volatility and the uncertainty is going to end anytime soon. Again, very, very thankful to all the panelists here who are able to participate. I have a bunch of questions that I have not been able to get to in the chat. So if you have those questions and we missed it, please follow up with us. We can provide contact info for the panelists if you have individual questions. Everyone here has fortunately been very willing to speak on the record, which is also a little bit in short supply today. I understand there was a question about retaliation and larger companies staying silent, and I think the key message, one of the key takeaways, is that the small businesses they have everything to lose. There is no one else who's going to bear this burden for them, and so I think you're seeing more engagement by the small businesses, and I am incredibly thankful to everyone who's willing to put yourselves out there and tell that story, because I think it's important. But again, thank you everyone for joining. If we didn't get to your question, feel free to follow up. If we did get to your question, you have more questions, shoot us a note too, and we'll do our best here.
Thank you.
Thank you.